Jeremy Packer.
Luke.
Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you making the trip down.
Oh, yeah. Returning to the roots, kind of.
We've spoken on the phone before, but this is the first time I'm actually getting to meet you in person. If you don't know, Jeremy is an entrepreneur expert dealing with startups, coding. You name it, this guy has probably done it. And I'm just really stoked you're here, man. So let's hear it for Jeremy.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've talked. And, I've seen your growth. I've seen the progress. Got to tour your facility. It looks awesome. It's a great, I encourage everyone that's in Southern Illinois to come check this place out.
I appreciate you saying that. And shout out to Brittany Bateman, also, who is the person who told me to call you, Jeremy. We were doing some stuff, and she's like, you got to talk to Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
And so I called, and that was a couple of years ago at this point.
Yeah. No, that was during her Brainstorm Boutique, kind of getting all of that. I was on one of her podcasts and, talked a variety of things. So,
yeah. So we're going to talk about your background because it's extensive. Southern Illinois native, had a lot of success with apps at SIU. You're involved in so many different things, man. Esports, patents. You've done a lot of stuff on Facebook, but now this new Solar Eclipse app is sort of the precipice of why we're here, and we'll get to that later. But first, I want to for anybody that doesn't know you, can you give us a brief rundown of who you are, where you're from, what you're doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Chicago, but I came to Metropolis, Illinois, because I have a brother who is kind of a crazy person to be 15, 16 in Chicago, and so my parents wanted to get away, kind of, find escape. And so going here, I went to public schools and I ended up going to Community Christian Academy, which, interesting enough, being raised Jewish, going to a Christian school, you kind of already learn diversity in different ways, and so in high school, I started hosting LAN parties for games. I had a group of friends that always played Guitar Hero or Smash Brothers, and
fun games. I remember that.
Yeah. And our families weren't super big on us, staying up till 3 a.m. yelling at each other about winning a game, and so we would always rent out local facilities, charge an entry fee, and my mom was actually the door person because being 15 at the time, a lot of places didn't really want to do business with me, and it's just one of those things where my parents played a huge role, in kind of that nurturing, we don't care what you believe in as long as you believe in something, and when you inspire kids to have a choice and not just kind of settle on a side, you get to explore so many different things, and so after I did the LAN parties and the gaming, all that kind of stuff, one of my great friends at the time, Edgar, and we sold everything that we had, in terms of like our NFL games and all of that. And we bought speakers and started hosting dance parties for our high school,
Okay.
Weird stuff.
That's a shift of the sports games to buying speakers to now in events.
Yeah. Going into just actual events. And it was one of those things where I didn't really work a real job in high school. It wasn't until college where I ended up working at a McAllister's, but that's a different story.
Which also has some benefits.
Oh, delicious food.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go.
100%. The club is fantastic. And so it was when I got to college that, coming from Metropolis, and we had a lot of different things that were happening in our city, but it was still very small, and a lot of my friends weren't going to go to college. They were going to just stay in their roots. And at the time, my parents, my mom, it was a no. Like, you're going to college. I heard that from day one. And I'm glad I did. Senior year, almost dropped out because of an app.
Okay.
Glad I stuck to it.
Okay, let's hear about this.
And so I made my way to SIU, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I learned how to code when I was 12. I was building MySpace themes back in the day, kind of just playing around with stuff.
Like different backgrounds, right?
Yeah, the
music.
backgrounds, the fonts, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was recording music at the time, and he wanted to have this nice, style thing, you know, and like all the rappers at the time, they would always have super flashy imagery or, you know, like put me next to a car with 24-inch rims and, you know, whatever it may be, you know. So I bust up Photoshop, put him next to the car, you know, he doesn't own, but it works.
Photoshop's amazing that way.
You know, and someone random going to his MySpace, that's a nice car he owns.
Yeah.
You know, we still see the illusions today.
It's brilliant.
So, you know, it's when I learned how to code early, it was one of those things where I'm a third generation entrepreneur. You know, my father was an entrepreneur, my grandfather was too. And I just had different interests. You know, I liked designing, I liked art, and I also liked money, you know, and I mean, hopefully a lot of people do.
And business, right?
Business, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not until college when you start to realize, like, I have a lot of diverse skills. What if I try to monetize these, you know? And it was my freshman year of college where I started to do some stuff at SIU Housing. You know, I was helping build the promotional stuff for the campus, you know, getting to kind of work on design work, you know, and it was actually right during the change of the old clock tower logo.
Oh, yeah,
you
sure.
know?
Pulliam Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they made that big change. I think the company was Lippman Hearn.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Weird that stuck to, you know, I can't remember what I had to eat last week, but I remember that name from 10 years ago.
It's funny what sticks with you like that.
So weird.
Yeah.
You know, but they came in, they rebranded everything, and they changed, you know, the typical Saluki mascot, you know, but it was one of those things where it flushed me into branding, you know, and like having eyeballs watching everything. You know, I had fantastic bosses, Crystal Bowl, Rebecca Dykes. They both encouraged me so much, you know, to like experiment with design, you know, and then they also warned me to prepare for the red ink when I would get it back, you know, and like those are lessons that you don't necessarily learn all the time when you're just answering or returning work, you know. They don't give you that kind of wiggle room. Right. And so it was kind of one of those things where I was living in Neely, you know, and I would hop on the elevator. I would go to the 15th, 17th floor, and I would see one of my posters I made, you know.
That's cool.
And it was just kind of like coming from Metropolis, you know, there's probably more people living in this residence hall than there is in my town.
Wow.
You know, so just kind of probably not that extreme, of course.
But probably not too far
Not too far either.
No.
And it was just kind of one of those things where I enjoyed that. I enjoyed having reach, you know, like through actions, you know. And so it was one of those things where I then joined a fraternity my sophomore year, and that was when I started to explore the nightlife of Carbondale, realized that there was a lot of great things happening, yet there was a lot of things we didn't know, like what the bar ATM fee was, what the covers were, you know, what the drink specials were, what the entertainment was. Because at the time, there was 17, 19 different bars.
Wow.
You know, like, and I grew up where we would see SIU on the news for their crazy 2000 Halloween parties or whatever it may be.
Right.
And it was even legendary at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I graduated in 2015. And so I think you and I kind of overlapped a little bit with our experience there.
Yes, I graduated in 16.
Nice. And, you know, we still had those nice parties and those kind of extremes, but we didn't have all of it that they used to, you know. And granted, back in the 2000s, they didn't have necessarily Instagram or Facebook or anything like that to promote those parties like we do. Yet for some reason, we have decreased attendance and all of that. It's an interesting way to look at it, but there is different interests that these kids may have now, you know, not to mention the diversity rates, you know, like one of the main things about SI Eclipse, the app that I'm working on now, you know, is that the increase in Spanish speaking adults in this region has increased dramatically over the past 2 years.
Really?
And it's led to the point where in our feedback that we, you know, conveyed out to the public, people wanted Spanish translations. you know, and it's one of those things where 10 years ago, you wouldn't expect that in Southern Illinois, you know?
Right.
And like being with SIU, the campus was diverse, you know, and I'm sure you remember that too.
Sure. Very international.
Very international.
Population.
Yeah. And a lot of very fantastic international events. You know, I got to experience some great food that I never would have gotten from Quattro's.
Right.
You know?
Right. That's a great cultural experience of the college experience. You know, that cultural exchange.
Right.
Is so valuable. And like you said, you can't get it maybe in an outside setting at a normal business in this area, potentially. So that I think is amazing that SIU is in this region and all the talent, the outside, you mentioned diversity that it brings, and how many people have been through SIU. The connections of the alumni network is just incredible.
It is incredible.
I mean, you and I are connecting on alumni network.
Right.
Right here, right now.
No, I mean, it's one of those things too, where, you know, the SIU Foundation and the work that they've done, you know, to not only, you know, commemorate people that are doing this, but also making sure that people that are actively engaged with SIU know what's possible, you know. And if you look on the board, there's some pretty insane things that have happened from our school, you know, and I'm not on that board, you know, like, I mean, Kurt Jones, the founder of Dippin' Dots, you know, what?
I think
like,
everybody in America has had Dippin' Dots.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's just one of those things where when you have staples that were built in the same place, you know, and I'm going to have to also mention like Mike Phillip from Rovertown. You know, I don't know if you ever used Rovertown, but it started as a coupon app. You know, they used to have these big blue bones that you would see on campus.
I've seen those. I remember those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very distinct and
Yes.
very memorable. They had a very nice color. And, you know, they have actually transitioned over to, you know, a new business model, and they're killing it. They're doing very well, you know. And if it wasn't for Mike building Rovertown out of the SIU Research Park, I would have never had confidence to build an app in Southern Illinois, you know. And that has led, I mean, their app is huge now.
Wow.
You know, and it's just, that's just to kind of give more reference to like the other great people, you know. And then there's Peter Gregory, you know, who IPO'd a company that went huge.
Yeah.
So a lot of great names in this region, a lot of great potential. It's just embracing that potential, you know.
So how did you embrace your potential at your time at SIU? Because it sounds like you've had a background, young age coding, of entrepreneurship as well. How did you do that at SIU, and how did that take you to your next step?
So when I was in SIU Carbondale, they had Saluki Ventures, and that was a SIU Research Park kind of student-led organization where, you know, you have business meetings and you kind of talk about what's going on. And if you have a business idea, they'll help you craft it, you know. And I had an app idea at the time called Life at Southern. And it was an app that we had a big Twitter following, big Facebook following. But the main thing was we would tell you events happening in Carbondale, the drink specials, ATM fees, cover, you know, those types of things. And it was just right from your hand, you know, right before apps were kind of anything huge, you know. I'm talking 2011.
Wow.
I
think that's before I was even on Instagram. Like before I was on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I recently looked at an old screenshot that we had, and it was of me going to the Jimmy John's restaurant in town, and you used to not be able to order online. And when you clicked on it on Life at Southern, it would take you to a PDF of their menu. So you could just hit order now and you would call them. So you'd have the menu right in front of you as you called.
Nice.
You know, and it's like, those are the useful things, but in reflection, it's like, that was technology, you know?
For sure. And for any college kid, super valuable having Jimmy John's, being able to just press a button on your phone to call, because late nights, you mentioned at the bars and stuff like that, you're hungry.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to want maybe a sandwich.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
2 buttons versus typing in the 5 letters in Jimmy, you know?
Right.
Yeah, 5 letters. I had to check. You know.
So this app started as part of the venture.
Yes. And so, well, Saluki Ventures was there, and I luckily was accepted into their program, and they kind of, they used me as a kind of I don't want to say they used me by any means, but it was just kind of a press move. It was come look at what Jeremy Packer's doing, with our help. And because of that, I was able to talk to local CEO programs and kind of do a lot of different things. But along with that, in reflection, having a stamp of approval from the SIU Research Park, where it's like, this idea isn't dumb enough to fail tonight. It was that affirmation and the continued understanding that this has potential if it's structured right, and this is a student that we can train, and luckily because of that, I got to meet great people, and life at Southern failed because we tried to expand it to Murray State and life at Murray, and the thing about that is Murray had dry counties, and whole different experiences. And at the time, you don't necessarily think about that. But when you're a startup and you invest so much money on expansion and then it screws you, what's the point?
Yeah.
So.
But a lesson learned, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that didn't stop you, did it?
It didn't. No, it was one of those things where it started making me, kind of just rethink everything. And one of the main things with life at Southern, for instance, is that we had this way where it was curbside. I don't know if you remember that place.
I think I do.
It's on the corner, kind of by Thai Taste.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to have, their computers always hooked up to their TVs. It was really before Chromecast or anything like that. So it's like if we gave them a browser link, they could actually show that off.
That's cool.
And so it was one of those things where I was in there one night and I had kept on hearing their customers ask, what are the specials? And so I actually built a digital drink display for them.
Wow.
So it was pulling in the data from Life at Southern, showing it on their TVs in 2012. And now, Tapmaster, it's a similar thing,
mm-hmm.
Except they've raised 20 million, 30 million plus, and they're across the world.
Wow. So this is the app we're talking, the app market in general is huge, right?
Right.
We're talking major money, right?
Very big.
I mean, the 20, whatever, the one you just mentioned. I mean, that's an example. So what about apps? Why do you think that is? Why does it demand so much value?
I think that there are a lot of different calibers to it. And if you would have asked me this even last year, I would have had different answers, And the reason I mention this is because after SIU, I went and launched another app called RapChat. I actually couldn't afford internet at my house at the time, and I was working at the McDonald's towards Murfreesboro. It's not there anymore,
I remember it.
It was one of those things where I could go work for this company. They couldn't pay me, but it was this promise of equity. And I love to freestyle, it's probably something you didn't assume, but I love to rap. I love to freestyle, make music, have fun, cool. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I play piano and all of that too. But, the idea of listening to one of your favorite beats, being able just to kind of vibe, it's great. And my friends and I used to rap all the time in high school, and whenever I first saw this idea about RapChat, it was only an iOS app. And at the time, they had 30,000 users, so it's the potential for it could be big. People are using it, but all you could do is hit record, rap over a beat, and upload it. That's it. I got the role, and 4 months later, we got accepted into 500 Startups, which is a VC-backed investment fund started by Dave McClure, an early employee of PayPal.
You know that PayPal ring? You've seen the graphics with the circles of those early PayPal people?
Oh, yeah.
And it like, well, how much influence they've done to the whole market, you know?
Yeah, the quote unquote PayPal mafia.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, very huge. And, you know, we were batch 15 of 500 startups. And what's interesting is that the companies before us, you know, I'll start naming a few and I'm sure you'll recognize them, but Credit Karma, MakerBot, can't think of anything other, but it's like 12 or 13 unicorns, billion-dollar companies.
Wow.
You know, they've definitely made their money back on these investments, and they gave us $125K for 5% of our company.
Wow.
You know, and that's very early money, but it automatically evaluates at 2.5 million. You know,
Incredible.
And when you just have an app idea, it's money on the table. You know, it's like, let's do this. And I was an Android developer. That's where I got my passion from. And so whenever I got brought onto RapChat, I was building out their Android app. And I ended up building out their Android app, moving over to iPhone, building that out, building the website, redoing the infrastructure, and then launching it internationally.
Wow. You've got a lot of roles there.
It grew. I went from kind of the mobile engineer to the director of engineering.
Oh, wow.
And that role came with, you know, the founder, Seth Miller, you know, him and Pat Gibson, which Pat Gibson is P. Holla, a rapper out there, you know, he's really good.
Yeah.
They did a good job raising money, raised capital. You know, we've raised the Series A, you know, it was over $1 million after that first initial.
Wow.
And we've expanded, we've grown. I've vested out. I don't have to be a part of it anymore, you know, so I don't, you know, we don't deal with it. But the thing is, you know, as of last year, when I asked their present Android developer, you know, hey, what code is still mixing track A and track B? Oh, it's the code you wrote.
Wow.
Thanks. You know?
Wow.
And so it's one of those things where I got to help build this company where so many people told me, like, no one's ever going to pay for that, you know? And now people actually pay a monthly subscription to be able to get unlimited free beats, being able to record on your phone, being able to apply auto-tune, reverb, 17 other tracks. And not only that, but being able to upload it to Facebook, SoundCloud, YouTube, or any of these other things and start making money off of it. You know, it's a recording studio in the palm of your hand.
That's so cool.
You know, it's massive. It's used in 150 countries, 10 million users a month.
Wow.
Huge, you know.
I'd say, man, that's incredible.
And it was one of those things where I try, and the realistic part of this is that the accolades that I've received from that have made everything else feel so small.
Really?
You know, and it's like, I think this is the perfect segue to SI Eclipse here.
Sure.
Because, you know, when you get 1 million downloads on an app that you just made, you feel great, you know, and then you build an app for your hometown and you only get 500 downloads, you know. It's like, well, first off, your hometown doesn't have 1 million people in it.
Right.
You know, and you know, the diversity and the age groups in these communities, most people weren't using cell phone apps or cell phones in general, you know, flip phones still.
Right.
You know, and so it's one of those things where there's so many different calibers, you know, above it. Like, those millions of users aren't all coming from the US, you know. They're coming from all around. And understanding, like, what success is in business versus just a metric was one of those learning lessons for me. You know, and right after I launched the first SI Eclipse app, I had wrote a recap, you know, on the lessons I learned from it. And, you know, one of them was I didn't embrace the community enough. You know, there was a lot of people that were doing different things, and I thought that people were just trying to, like, make the water as useful as possible, if that makes sense. You know, the eclipse is coming. A lot of people are going to be coming. You know, let's try to monetize this the best way we can. And I mean, that's perfectly fine. Events happen like that. It's just, it got to a point where everyone was so siloed at that point during the first eclipse that we didn't have community connection like we needed to, you know. And I will say that this year I've been part of, you know, not necessarily being directly associated, but I've been in attendance of some of these meetings, you know, and they're well organized. They're extremely cohesive and they understand what they did wrong, you know, the first time, and they've made sure that it's not going to happen again, you know, and that's kind of one of those things. And whenever I was writing that recap, I had made this promise to myself that come 2024, I was going to relaunch this app, you know, because I wasn't satisfied with how it happened. And a lot happened, you know, in the past couple of years since the eclipse. And, you know, the main thing is I was in a crazy car accident last December, almost died, you know, 15 surgeries since, and it's a true miracle, you know.
Wow.
I think Barnes Jewish every chance I get because they honestly saved my life.
Wow.
You know, the fact that I'm able actually to conversate with you right now, you know, they told my mom I wasn't going to be able to walk or speak again.
Oh my gosh.
You know,
No way.
and it's one of those things where I had to relearn how to talk. You know, like I have so many implants in my legs, you know, and I walked here. Like I parked my car at Ethos and I was able to walk here. You know, like last April I was in a wheelchair. And it's just kind of one of those things. And like to mention the wheelchair, when I was working on the SI Eclipse art, you know, I wanted to make sure that people felt inclusive. And like in the art on the app, you'll see people that are using walkers and that are in wheelchairs, you know, because before when I launched the app, everyone was standing in our designs. And it was one of those things where I didn't realize how isolated it felt until I couldn't get somewhere because of my wheelchair or because of a walker, you know, and being 31 years old and requiring that hurt. So I can't imagine how an older person would feel, you know? And so we've tried to make everything feel inclusive, you know, including our art, including the designs, including our verbiage, including the event types that we're promoting, because Illinois and Southern Illinois specifically is so diverse. You're going to find something that you enjoy, you know, whether it's going to Baldwin Up Cross and being able to have kind of a, you know, just a beautiful scenic view, or if you want to go to SIU Carbondale and, you know, cosplay at SalukieCon. Like there's so much diversity here, but that's what makes this area so great. And that was one thing that I wanted to make sure that I did. And, you know, in full transparency, like after my accident, I lost my mom.
I'm sorry, man.
You know, 2 months after. And I was kind of mentally healing. And I told myself, I'm going to work on version 2.0 of my life, you know, and I'm a huge Grant Cardone, Dave Ramsey type guy. You know, I listen to all of those podcasts, all those people, and like Gary Vaynerchuk, like constantly, you know, it's like build, build, build. I'm young. Let's do this,
Yeah.
you know? And it's one of those things where I was talking earlier about like the foundation that my parents had on me, you know, after my accident, losing my mom 2 months after, I was in a walker at her funeral, you know, like one of those crazy weird things. And it was just, people go through pain and struggles in so many different ways. And like from being physically depleted and then going from a mentally depletion, you know, this idea of me starting to build another app was like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, I was barely doing the work that I needed to do. Well, I was completing the work I needed to do, but it wasn't driving me as much. I was having to relearn how to walk, how to talk, doing all these different things on top of grieving. And I actually tried killing myself.
Oh my gosh.
Not sure if that's a little too deep for this or not,
okay.
but it was actually in that moment where, you know, I went through all these different things. I read a David Goggins book, Highly recommend it. And it was one of those points where I reached, I call myself version 2.1 now, because I pushed through a lot of those things. And it was that realization that the kid who hit me passed away in my accident. And my mom passed away shortly after. And it was one of those things where I couldn't help but question why. And people go through it. I was in counseling, therapy, betterhelp.com, fantastic. It's just one of those things where no matter how many times someone tells you something is supposed to be a certain way, there's not really a difference between you and the person telling you that. Because if they went through the same things that I went through, they would also be sorrowed, And realizing that that's staple, I started focusing on 3 areas of my life, abundance, gratitude, and purpose. And it's this idea that I have everything that I need and want. And I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful for the connections. We spent 30 minutes talking about all the connections we had together, and it's because the connections in Southern Illinois have the potential to exponentially grow anything that you throw at it. And most importantly is purpose. It's like everyone used to talk about getting up, going to work, watching TV, that kind of stuff. But, the idea that, I spent 160 hours working on an app just to make sure that people are able to navigate to one of their best memories in their life in the next week, and that goes back to the numbers thing I was explaining to you, because if I can help millions of kids rap on their phone, that's fantastic, but if I can help a local community member who can't find the help that they need in their local news or in their local sources, but they're able to find that memory, that's worth more than anything you can throw at it. And it was that recalibration of thinking where you realize the importance of every action you have once you have the power of perception. When you have people looking at you, you have the ability to create amazing things, whether it's the energy around us, whether it's the law of attraction, people joining you and contributing to those forces, it's undeniable, and the past 4 months of running through so many different hurdles with my working space and my job and my companies and this app, going through another breakup, it's one of those things where I wanted to quit several times, those days where it's hard to get up out of bed, and as an entrepreneur, I know that you probably have had those days too.
It happens, man. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, where you just kind of question it. And it's one of those things where you have to look back at your pillars, those pillars that are going to control what you build upon your life. And that's what's got me through this, because if I would have quit any of those days where I wanted to, I wouldn't be here, and luckily I've had several news sources cover SI Eclipse. We're getting the reach that we need to for it. I get to speak on the NASA stage at, the SIU arena.
That's amazing, man.
Where I got to graduate from.
That's so cool.
And so it's about pushing positivity now. I think I kind of don't remember what the first question was on that.
That's okay. No,
Sorry if I talked.
No, this is great. It's super, I just admire your openness and your resiliency of what you've been through very recently. That's really admirable, relatable, and just, it gives hope that you can get through these things, even if, there are moments of when you feel completely lost, you maybe you're trying to find that purpose. I think the 3 pillars that you laid out, abundance, gratitude, and
purpose.
That is excellent. And wow, I think if more people could channel that And I don't know if being an entrepreneur helps that, but I would think it would, to have that self-belief in what you're doing and to have purpose is super, super important. And I kind of want to dive into the app a little more.
Yeah.
Can we take a look at it?
Oh, absolutely.
I want to pull it up. Maybe you can talk over what we're looking at.
Cool.
I know we have you released a new video.
Yes.
Can we pull that up? And
absolutely.
Let's check this out. So SI Eclipse. Now this is available on the App Store and Google.
And Google. You can actually go to sieclipse.com. We have the download links available right there. This app is covering all of Southern Illinois. We worked with the Small Business Development Center at not only SIU Carbondale, but we also worked with the Metro East Small Business Development Center, which is located at the SIU Edwardsville campus.
Okay, very nice.
And so Southern Illinois University, all around the board, they've helped me.
That's amazing. You mentioned earlier that stamp of approval,
right?
Even though it was back in your college days, but even those research facilities, I mean, that's a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
Yeah.
And one of these things is like, while I'm mentioning these big organizations and all that kind of stuff, like I want to preface the fact that out of everything that we've had to pay for with development and all of that, they were not our cost. All of their services were free.
Wow.
And I mean, I just highly recommend it. As an engineer, sometimes I need help with finances and sometimes I don't want to pay an accountant or, sometimes I just need advice. I need a third-party opinion that is not directly involved in the trenches of the war. And because of that, the small business development centers are able to help. I use the Metro East one because I'm located, the Packer Labs office is located near that one. Now, we used to be in the research park, but I was able to tap into that too. And so diving back into the app, we wanted to make sure that this was bigger than just Carbondale. And that's why we tapped into other SBDC,
that's smart.
Because they're helping so many other businesses. It's just the same, just a different audience.
So what can people find on the app? What does it do? What will they see?
Yeah. And so one of the first things about the app is that we have a countdown to, the grand moment.
Oh, that's cool.
So instead of you having to Google, when is the eclipse? What time is it happening? And then you having to remember that exact thing, you can download an app and it's going to tell you right there, first page. Along with that, we've teamed up with Southern Illinois Now to embrace local tourism to a different degree that's not normally done here. And for local businesses that are wanting to get involved, you can actually visit this website and go to contact us to get it. But basically, on the app, we showcase a lot of participating businesses. You can actually visit those during the eclipse, during the month of April. You can scan it with your phone and you'll get a participating entry into winning one of these great prizes, powered by Southern Illinois Now.
Wow.
It's a fantastic cabin getaway, which is, being from Southern Illinois, we have some fantastic opportunities for that.
Absolutely. Beautiful areas. So
beautiful. And, one thing is that the first version of SI Eclipse, we only focused on Carbondale, and I think at the time, there was 12 events happening in Carbondale, and at the time that was a lot. People had everything that they needed. But with this version, I wanted to expand it to Southern Illinois, the SI Eclipse. And so we actually have over 30 events in 20 different cities right now.
Wow.
And they're all diverse. Everything from viewing parties to winery experiences to educational seminars. You can actually go listen to NASA people if you want to talk, or you can go enjoy wine with your friends.
Yeah.
A lot of different diversity with that. And one of the last features about the app is that we can actually, if you tell us your interests, we're going to, feed you events that you're going to be interested in, kind of increasing that reach and that engagement to where if something is added on our app that we know that is kind of a, ring the bell, this is perfect for you, you'll get a push notification.
That's cool. That's fascinating.
It's just kind of one of those things where, we don't see many people doing this around this area.
Not at all.
Everyone in the area is using their phones. And the reality is you're either an Android guy or an iOS guy. or, you know,
Right.
and it's one of those things where, I have both phones because I'm a developer, but I prefer my Android, hands down all day,
Yeah.
you know.
Sure.
So,
Well, first of all, that's awesome, man. And I think the giveaway is super cool. Shout out to SI Now. I mean, that's a great value just for getting the app and scanning. If you're not going out in the Eclipse, I don't know what you're doing with your life because you really need to.
right.
What are you doing? Like, get out, So get the app, go to this event, scan it, and enter to win a great prize.
Right. Yeah.
Like-
And, not only that, but it's just, if you're going to go to a local community that is rallying around you having a great experience, support those people doing it. And with this app, being able to target those local businesses that deserve your money, that's where you need to go, and it's kind of, that two-way street where, because of SI Now, we're going to be able to encourage people to not only visit and enjoy locally, but it's also going to create even further memories, being able to enjoy the best taco truck during this eclipse or whatever it may be. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and knowing that everything that's listed on this app has been approved. It's verified, And one of the funniest things is when we were doing research, looking at events, the amount of events on Facebook that have Solar Eclipse 2024 as the header, it doesn't tell you where the business is, where anything is, good luck.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, and not to mention, for some reason, none of these events in Southern Illinois have put much money behind sponsored posts, and because of that, once you start looking at Eclipse events, you get thrown into the algorithm. And I'm getting hit with promotions for Eclipse events out of state everywhere.
Wow.
Because we're one of 13 states being, accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And so these other areas are looking at our area as a pool, and with SI Eclipse, I'm hoping we can contain that. And that's one of the main things,
Wow. It's really interesting. Maybe we can pull up the video that we had referenced earlier, and maybe you can talk about those features again, and we can just show it on the screen.
Yeah. And so this is the new SI Eclipse video that we've created. And in this first scene, we're just kind of showing, what it's going to look like. And, right by the bat, we want you to know that's your mobile guide. Like, we're showcasing our sponsors. We're showcasing all these events that are happening all around the area. Those are all the categories we have. And along with that, we've teamed up with SI Now to support local participating businesses. You go to local business, scan a QR code, and you're entered to win. It's just super simple, and you're helping local tourism. And, lastly, if this white color and these categories are not different enough for you, we actually allow dark mode. And so you're actually able to, enjoy what you want. It's a countdown to the exact moment right at the palm of your hand.
How does it even start with that? Because I have no freaking clue.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that I had made up my mind that I wasn't going to relaunch this app in December of last year. It was a year after my accident, still kind of going through all of this emotional hurdles, whatever. And I found myself at Hack SI. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
The local hackathon,
Mm-hmm.
powered by Dave Glass. Shout out. It's a fantastic event. Awesome. And I was seeing kids code, and Hack SI is actually the place where I built Life at Southern.
Oh, wow.
Now
That's a cool connection.
Yeah. One of those things, because during my time at SIU, they actually weren't teaching app development.
Really?
And so all of my learning was outside of school. And during the Sluky app competitions, it was just like I competed against people, but it was just different. And so, yeah. Trying to think of where I can go from there.
You're good. So you're at the
I'm at Hack SI.
Hack SI.
Yes.
And so the kids were hacking.
Kids were hacking. I see kids working on code, all of that kind of stuff. And I see one of the kids ask me a weird question about what color shirt someone should wear during a scene, and it was just kind of off the wall, and he then typed it into ChatGPT. And it was the first time that I had actually witnessed DALL-E working, which is their image side of processing. And I've followed AI for a little bit over the past year or two. I've seen its progressions. It's playing tremendous roles in the work that I do. It's going to affect my industry significantly, as I'm sure it's going to affect everybody.
Right.
And it was at that moment where I realized, I once paid a designer reasonably for his time drawing something. Sometimes it gets very expensive when you have revisions. And on the SI Eclipse app, if you notice this front screen right here, where you see the people looking up at the eclipse, that's actually AI generated art.
Oh, really?
And
that's cool.
What's crazy about it is if I would have had to contract someone to do that, it would have been a lot of revisions, or me accepting something. This is version like 173 of me feeding it prompts and me getting different images and then presenting it in front of an audience and asking them, what do you think is better?
Mm-hmm.
And back to your research part, I wanted to make sure that this was accessible to not only the younger kids, because I focused on promoting this to college kids last time. And I wanted to make sure that the older adults, who are now finally used to using cell phones, used to having iPhones, could actually embrace this app and kind of enjoy it. Because a younger kid, they can calculate when the eclipse is. They know, the pinpoints, they can do all of that faster versus, your grandparents who have to, look at the specific sundial of these moments.
Right.
And so it was that type of research where it was about, the imagery, what we were needing to show to people, the colors that we would go with. Like, for instance, we chose a red color, with our logo. And in many cases, red, outside of stop sign and caution, people look at it as a malicious color. It's a negative color in many things. When you have errors, it's red,
The red pen and a paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
when you're grading.
It's one of those things, and those are hard things to hear, especially when you already have a logo, you have all of this. And, one of the main things that's led to is that in-app white, is kind of the main color. Like, we have a light mode and a dark mode, and red is our accent color, but our main focus, the main data that you're getting is in normal colors, and if it wasn't for hearing those negative connotations about what this looks like, then you start to think about it. And, I mentioned with, that front image there, like being in a wheelchair, I wanted to make sure that people that were in wheelchairs felt accessible, being able to know that they can go and attend these things and not feel any different than they are. Like, you don't need to be that way. And it was just kind of one of those things where we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And we realized that inclusivity is much more than just including special events. It's your marketing, it's your branding, it's the communication, it's your responses to things. It's so much more. And when you think about app development and launching a product like that, you don't necessarily think about that. This is a utility product. In the next 2 weeks, people have no use for it. And it's one of those things where it's kind of weird to spend 4 months building an app just for it to be used within a month, and
I got something because you mentioned inclusivity, right?
Yep.
Which is a big keyword, buzzword, which is great. And having it for kids, but for now you mentioned much more wider demographic has phones now than last time. But also that the temporary nature of this project, when the eclipse happens, it's done. And it kind of reminded me of, not to tangent too much, but of some of the Burning Man connection that we also have, the inclusivity, but also art made for temporary purposes, and to gather around and for inclusivity. And there's a lot of other reasons too, but I think that's cool. I think it's a cool aspect. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Have you been to Burning Man?
I have.
Nice.
I went in 2018.
Wow.
That was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to touch on this really quick.
Yeah.
So do you have a number in your life that you just constantly see?
12.
12?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just one of those things where if you get a random room or you're assigned something, it just always comes up. You know what I mean? And so my number is 33. And it's not a number that is not like, it's not necessarily used much, you know, like even in esports, for instance, you have a 32 team bracket, you know, like 33 doesn't happen often. It's just kind of one of those unique things.
That's true. I never thought about that.
Like when you see the number 12, for instance, you know, when you see it, you know, you have a connection to it, you know, especially when you're looking for that guidance or that verification that's like, this is right, you know, so I'm supposed to do, you know. And so in 2019, I went to Burning Man.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was actually the 33rd Burning Man.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was one of those things where it changed my life. You know, being in a fraternity, you know, I was super big on wearing Ralph Lauren and Polo and worrying about all these brands and all that kind of stuff. And the minute you're thrown in the Burning Man, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually got to help with an art exhibit out there.
Oh, cool.
I was actually a guardian of a divine feminine temple, you know, where, you know, women could come in and express, you know, concerns. There, you know, a lot of different things happen at Burning Man.
A lot.
You know, and it's a beautiful thing.
It
and
is.
I was able to watch the door and make sure that people, you know, felt accepted and being able to felt inclusivity.
Yeah.
You know, it's like really what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Holding the space.
Exactly. You know, and allowing people to express themselves and to be creative and to not give them verbiage that appears as a flaw, you know. And we hear that kind of communication so much, you know. And like the reason I mentioned that is because, you know, Burning Man was huge. You know, it's one of those events where highly recommend. Most people are just not going to get it. No matter how much you explain it to them, that's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
I would have to agree.
Yeah. So many reasons to go. Like I just,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
It was life-changing for me too. Yeah.
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 And it's something that you don't necessarily hear about, you know, and that's why whenever you mentioned it, I had to ask, you know, because people, you know, they hear the thoughts of going to festivals and that kind of stuff, but it's like, well, how do I buy something, you know? And so it's the idea, it's like, well, how can you trust someone to just give you something, you know? And so, I mean, I think that if the world acted like that, we'd see vastly different things around the world. But
I think you're absolutely right. I think that, you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in it. There's a whole culture behind it. It's not just, you know, people partying in festivals. I mean, there's the art that's there, the culture that's there, the community that's there. It's just, I think to me, it felt like the pinnacle in a way. You know, there's no, for anyone that doesn't know, there's no, you can't, like you mentioned, you can't buy anything. It's demonetized pretty much. You can get coffee and ice and that's it. And people gifting is a big part of it. Like you mentioned, how can I trust somebody to give me this, whatever it is?
right.
Could be a hot dog, could be a drink, could be, I mean, variety of things.
Yeah. I remember my 10th day there and my partner and I were walking, you know, to just kind of one of these random things that we saw, you know, because I mean, there's so many different camps and sometimes they welcome people and all of that, you know, and we just randomly see this guy walking towards us and he's dressed so strange and it's in the middle of the desert and the dude's wearing a black cat costume and he walks up to us and the simple question is, do you like strawberry? And then he pulls out from his little suitcase bag one of those white chocolate and strawberry like bars, you know, and just gives us two of them and then runs away.
Wow.
Like he walks towards us and then scurries away
In the cat suit.
in the cat suit. Like what?
What just happened here?
Yeah. It's so random, but when you go without sweets and all that kind of stuff for 10 days, that was the best ice cream I've ever had.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure you've had that kind of thing too, where you've go back to life outside of that. I actually flew from Burning Man to Atlantic City for an esports event.
Oh, wow.
And I went from camping in a tent, to a 5-star hotel with a casino.
Talk about a juxtaposition.
It was awful. It was so wild.
Yeah, that's a culture shock. I think there's a saying like returning to the default world after your Burning Man experience is like a transition.
Right.
Because it's like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah. And there's more neon lights at Burning Man than there are here, which is weird. But check pictures for those references.
Yeah. Super cool. Not to diverge too much.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important aspect too, something we can connect on. And just, the inclusivity, right? All ages events, just like this app is geared towards.
Right. I saw kids at Burning Man.
Yeah.
Which caught me off guard.
Right.
And, it's one of those things where you have to build areas that are acceptable for everyone, because that's the future, like
there's I was a temple guardian in my camp. I was invited by somebody actually through a connection at SIU. I did a study abroad program,
nice.
A documentary film program in Germany. And one of the schools that was part of this program was San Francisco State. And it was my buddy Reza. We did this documentary in Bonn, Germany, and this was probably 2015. And then he invited me in 2018 to go to Burning Man. And one of the sayings of that camp was, I have seen the future. Like you mentioned, this having a space for everybody. I totally agree. I think that needs to be the future.
Right. It's one of those things that has been so negatively assumed by these older generations. And because we haven't lived through what they've lived through, we haven't had war in our time, which is kind of crazy to think about, that people, our parents, once, they were trained to get under their desks during bombings and that kind of stuff. Like, we never had to deal with that. I do think that with the world changing and with all of these different countries promoting, nonviolence or doing all of that kind of stuff, I think it's important for people to go explore and find what actually makes them comfortable, because Burning Man was great. There was also some parts of it where I didn't feel 100% comfortable, and it's not a slam at them. But the thing is, if you're going to make a place where people can feel 100% included, there are going to be places where you personally don't fit in 100%.
Wow, that's a really good way to put that.
And it's one of those things where you have to accept and appreciate the mission versus the effect that it has,
Mm-hmm. That's so good. It's like inclusivity isn't just for people that you like. It's for people you don't like too.
Right.
That's real inclusivity. You might not like them, but by definition, I think that they should be included in that. And you're right. You might not be comfortable, but not everything's for you either.
Right.
It's okay.
And I think too, it's from the mathematical standpoint, if you put a value on comfortability of a situation, right? And if it's like, if you throw both of us in a situation, we're going to have different reactions to it, But the thing is, if it still equals 100%, is that bad? And if we're able to neutralize a situation, just like our roommates do, if they're able to neutralize their living situation in order to find a steady, consistent, and livable vibe, why couldn't we do that with events or with communities or that kind of stuff, outside of the need to have legal officers or that, but just having open conversations versus this is how we've done it for 200 years,
Yeah.
Excuse my accent.
I heard something just like that the other day.
Nice.
I mean, that is still pervasive throughout the culture. We've been doing this 100 years, 200
Right.
years. I mean, literally. But there's innovation. There's creativity. I mean, I think Burning Man started in the 80s, and has grown. I mean, I think 100,000 people almost attend.
Oh yeah.
And
a town that doesn't exist, outside of those 3 weeks, like
that's something. To me, I think it was like, felt like the pinnacle. Like I said, it was like, this is what community people coming together with common purpose, what we can accomplish. I mean, I want to go back.
yeah.
And it actually has inspired me so much in my business, how I try to like live my life, and it's the playa provides, as they say.
It does. And I think one thing to emphasize with that is, like, I have attention to detail, because of the work that I do and all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that I absolutely love, and I found it difficult to deal with too, is that while you're on the playa and you have a camp set up, you have to make sure that you leave the earth the way that you found it. And you have to clean up your space. You have to clean the dirt, sand, the playa, and make sure that it's combed out, and like I can't think of the exact
leave no trace.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, like,
it's the largest leave no trace event in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, it's to the point where it's not just someone looking around and saying this doesn't look right. They actually have satellites that are identifying the ground based on what it looks like and are able to censor it. I've looked into this tech because it's incredible, but you have to think about it too. Burning Man, it costs money to get there. It's not
cheap.
It's not a cheap event. And along with that, you have Google co-founders that are flying and getting dropped in via parachute. You have the richest people in the world that are attending these. You'll never know.
Elon Musk.
Yeah. I had a Diplo concert when I went there, and it was because Popeyes flew him in. I saw him after leaving a porta potty, and he was on a San Francisco bridge trolley DJing, just driving down Burning Man. Like, what?
How random.
But it's those kind of experiences where you just have to see it. And it's one of those things too where, I had this conversation, but it's like, if the U.S. goes under and we have to build a playa situation, I would want them to look at Burning Man as the reference, period. Because the idea of anything other than that in those situations wouldn't work. Like, with all of the traumas and all of the ways that communities are acting and the way that things are happening, for some reason, people aren't as connected as they used to be. We used to be able to connect with our neighbors versus this idea where it's weird to talk to them now. It's weird to wave at them, and meanwhile at Burning Man, you can walk next door and the person may not speak English, but you're going to get a hug and dance. And it's that kind of mentality that I think is super important for people to embrace, and with SIU, for instance, I mean, going to Metropolis, Massac County High School, like, we didn't have diversity. There was very little of it in a small town. And going to SIU where I had very limited white American teachers, and coming from a school where that was all I primarily saw was very different, and it was one of those things where, understanding acceptance, seeing people make mistakes, but realizing that the mistake that they made is simply because of them not knowing how something is supposed to be done, mm-hmm. And like at SIU, having so many diverse cultures, having so many different groups, you see so much, and you're, bombarded with information about how different places are. I'm sure you've gotten to that point too, where you question, why does the U.S. do things the way they do?
Sure.
Sure. And it's just simply because people are still listening to what their parents believe is the right way versus being grown up and raised in that ability to embrace change, to create change, to go through these struggles of not being 100% aligned with someone, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely some of the coolest art in the world, no doubt. Some of the coolest people, no doubt. And
Right.
some of the most influential people. So if you ever do have a chance, they do offer, I think like low income tickets now as well. So that it could be an option if that is an issue with anybody listening. But I do want to. Sick. That was good, man.
Thank you.
That was good. Okay. I just want to make sure we got that real quick. But is there we've talked a lot about different things today, but we've mentioned a lot. So I do want to know if there is any advice for maybe anybody listening. Maybe they want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe they want to get into coding. Maybe they just want to be curious. Maybe they're looking for their purpose. Maybe they're looking for the abundance that they're maybe lacking. What would you say to them?
You know, there's that famous, I believe it's a Martin Luther King quote, you know, and it's, you don't have to see the full staircase. You just have to take the first step. And I kind of reference that a lot, you know, because taking the chance on yourself, you know, no matter what it is, it's going to feel uncomfortable. But just like everything else in life, nothing is guaranteed. And when you start to realize that the one thing that you have control of is yourself and what you do and your intentions, you can start to allocate your time, you know, for that. And not just your time, but your mental power. It's not just about sitting at a room for 5 hours. You know, it's about being able to sit down and knock something out within an hour because you're fully focused on it. You know, I've made a lot of mistakes with tech, and even with this SI Eclipse app, you know, there are mistakes that, you know, I've noticed that were just, you know, too late to notice, but we can't let mistakes hold us back. It's one of those things where, you know, for some reason our generation is taught that failure is such a negative thing, you know, but the thing is, failure is usually used as an understanding point. You know, it's a reference point, because when you reach a failure, it's usually enough impact for you to stop something, you know, and that's when you're able to identify. And if I would have stopped at the failures of this, it wouldn't be here. And I think that it's all about just education. You know, there's that famous Steve Jobs commencement speech where it's talking about the point in your life where it's very hard to look in the future and connect the dots. But when you go back to your past, it's a lot easier, you know? And like, I think that it's one of those examples where, you know, the job that you are interested in today may have an impact in your future later, you know? And so take it. Like, you have to pursue what you want to do. You know, I think money is important and all of that, but we talked about it earlier today too, is that I received advice from Kyle Harfs, you know, before I went out to Silicon Valley. And it was like, do I give everything up that I know in Southern Illinois and go move in with 2 kids that I have no idea about and go start a startup? And I had no kids, and it was just one of those moments where I knew that it was going to be a defining point, failure or not, you know? And even in the communications we've had, we've talked about these apps I've done, you know, they're all technically failures. Like Rap Chat's not, you know, it's still going. Life at Southern failed, you know, like SI Now failed, or Southern Illinois.
Was it Eclipse? SI Eclipse? V1? No?
I had made a, please cut this.
We'll
SI
cut
Now.
that. Yeah.
I had turned Life at Southern into SI Now, which was an on-demand drink special app. and then Southern Illinois Now came.
Wow.
Different names.
Really?
Yeah. But
You hearing some static?
I am. Is it?
I don't know where that's coming from. That was random. Not sure. I was hearing it too.
Weird.
But so the failures are an important aspect of learning.
I think they are. I think that they're benchmark parts where in order to make progress, you have to figure out where you're starting from. And I think that with failures, identifying what failed in this is going to help you the next time. And I think that there are a lot of different things that I've learned from my failures that, are just compounding at this point. And I find joy in creating. I love the ability to be able to just build something. Like the idea that I don't need a hammer or I don't need wood, but I can actually create something in a digital world. And in the next 10 years, I'll be able to put glasses on and be able to experience those digital creations in a different way. Code is this year's this time's foundational work. And I mean, I encourage people to take chances. Like that's the main thing, because we take chances with jobs all the time. We take chances in classes that we don't want. Why not apply that to everything? And especially as a kid, you have your whole life ahead of you, but it's a lot easier to deal with it when you have your parents, when you have friends, when you don't have monthly bills, monthly expenses that add up. It's, I reflect on failure as learning lessons these days. Yeah. And as corny as it sounds, I think that a lot of people need to go through it, because you can identify when people are afraid of taking those chances. And it's usually those chances that lead to substantial results in every industry.
Right. Like you don't know if you don't try. And also if you don't try it, then that opportunity probably won't come back around.
Right.
And I think you touched on another aspect, that what you're doing today might be foundational for what you're doing later. And so if whether it's a job or a place in school, that has purpose, because like you said, you can't really look forward and reflect, but you can put those dots together looking back, and it's just another stepping stone in your story. And I think people need to pursue failure.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it does have a negative connotation, but if we base it based on the other things that we experience day to day, it's not that bad. It's, I recently shared a Grant Cardone post on my Facebook, but it's like bad situations can either deplete you, destroy you, or I've quoted this quote like 20 times, and of course I just dropped it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but it's one of those things where like bad situations either destroy you, deplete you, or like drive you. Mm-hmm. And that's not the exact quote, but it's the same concept where, these bad situations can make people, change, people happy. And it's like when you look at other companies, they've been around for so long and they've done so many struggles, and they've had struggles that have been around for so many years that we just don't know about them. For instance, I recently saw on Facebook about a post where Coca-Cola, they had people arguing about moving to not electric, but vehicles, because they used to have buggies with horses taking Coca-Cola to stores. And they didn't want to switch that because it was cheaper than gas, and that was in like early 1900s, but it's still one of those things where it's like businesses have those struggles too, mm-hmm. those changes. And it's just being able to adapt, being able to understand and learn from those failures and progressing from it, because if a failure plants a seed, it's then your responsibility to keep that seed watered, growing.
Yeah. Tony Robbins also has a great concept called state break. It's kind of, to literally break the state that you're in. So there's different ways to do it, but a big failure could do that. It shakes things up, and that can pop you in a different direction. And also there's some sort of what's it called? Analogy? I'm not sure. But basically the idea is, if things are going okay and just okay and just okay, but never really, there's not that big failure. There's not the, come apart. Well, they'll just stay okay. And then you'll just spend your whole life staying okay. And that actually these bigger failures are better because there's change, there's growth opportunity versus status quo.
Right. Yeah.
Something to think about.
No, absolutely. I think to your point, what they taught us in high school, for instance, about the baseline of our economy, the idea that, you don't need to get a college degree in order to live comfortably in the United States and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that may have been true 5-7 years ago. Inflation since COVID, it's very clear. It's very evident. There's nothing in sight that looks like it's going to alter that, outside of my favorite, not a financial advisor, but buy Bitcoin. And
it's going up, folks.
Yep. I think it's one of those things where we're in a different state where the generations before us, the generations after us, they all have to adapt to these different things. And as the economy is collapsing, well, I don't want to say it's collapsing. I don't know it's collapsing. It feels like it's collapsing, but I'm an engineer, not a financial guy. And, I tell my nephew and nieces, I want them to pursue education, and it's especially right now because I have seen AI and what it can do, and it's already better than 90% of the people that I've hired in many of those roles.
Wow.
And it's not saying anything negative about the people that I've hired by any means. It's just one of those things where if you need something quick outside of timeline, there's just so many different things, and we're going to see it all over. I've been trying to encourage them, where it's go into AI. It's going to be the next field, all that kind of stuff. And, they are still interested in computers, that kind of stuff. They're still interested in social media, and it's young kids are, I grew up on Facebook and Twitter, that was the big thing for us. And now it's TikTok for them. Mm-hmm. It's this huge thing where they're wanting to create, they're wanting to dance, they're wanting to share all this kind of stuff. But it's also alarming at the amount of content that they consume, the amount that they're consuming it, and what content they actually consume.
Sure.
It's definitely not Eclipse related content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. And who's pulling those levers behind the scenes for who's pumping out that content?
Right.
It's a big question. There's a lot, man. There's a lot of unknown as we are ever evolving in this changing landscape of tech, business, the world around us. I think this has been a great conversation, Jeremy. And I'm excited for the eclipse. And do you have plans?
I am going to be at the SIU Arena.
Nice.
I am speaking there that Sunday.
Cool.
Shout out to Rebecca Dykes for getting me the plug there. We're going to have a table set up too, promoting SI Eclipse. So if anyone is around the arena, stop by, come say hello.
We're going to have so many cool activities there that day and the leading up. So definitely go check this out.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys will have a table, and there'll be a lot of other awesome things happening too, right?
A lot of really cool opportunities, a lot of great speakers.
What time will you be speaking if anyone wants to come? Do you know?
I will be there at 11:30.
Cool.
Yep, 11:30 on that Sunday. I will say that I am after, I think, 2 NASA speakers. So if it's not as scientific, I'm sorry.
It's big shoes to follow.
A little bit. Yeah. You know, I do have the nerdy glasses, so I'll be good. I just don't have, everything. I left the rocket in Carbondale. Luckily I'm going to Carbondale to pick it up.
There you go. Blast off, man.
Yeah.
Let's blast off.
It's one of those things. But yeah, I'm really excited to have been able to talk with you. I know we've covered a lot of different things. I think what you're doing is awesome. I think your facility is great. This room is awesome too. It's super great. It's just, I had saw, a lot of the stuff you're doing, and I think that your audience is fantastic, and, just excited to be here.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'd love to have you back on. Love to do whatever, how we can collab in the future. This has been a great way to connect, have a great conversation. There'll be clips on social media in the coming days. But let's promote the app, promote yourself. Where can people get the app? They want to find you. They want to work with you. Where can they find you?
Yeah. And so this app is created by Packer Labs, which is my main holding company personally. It's packerlabs.com. We are in the process of launching a new service-based company focusing specifically on mobile app development. We actually even helped a school with the robotics stuff recently, being able to program like manufacturing type tools.
Cool.
We can do that kind of stuff now too.
That's awesome.
Wild world.
Yeah.
But the idea is that, we're actually launching a company called Moonbunker Media, because as we were talking about spaceships going off, to space, we've set up a moon bunker ready to protect your startup. What happens when you launch? You need to be able to maintain it. And that's
gotta have communication with mission control.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, it's, without diving too many into the details of that, but there are a lot of great opportunities in Southern Illinois, and a lot of people have had great app ideas and that kind of stuff. I know we've talked before on many things, and being able to establish a place where you can go and learn about mobile development, that kind of stuff. That's what we're working on.
That's awesome.
We want to, encourage people that Southern Illinois has the resources, because outside of tech, I was able to get everything that I needed to launch this here. And that's something that people need to realize. The tech is what I brought. And just like any other vertical in your business, if you're good at one thing, focus on that one thing. There's people to help you with the rest, and especially in this area. And like the one thing to mention is that salaries in this area are going to be significantly cheaper than they would be in Chicago or any of these bigger areas. And we're in a great facility where I was able to drive 2 hours from St. Louis here. That's my day. Like, that's nothing, and like the ability to be able to adapt and to reach out to local areas and to tap into those resources. Like, everyone needs to do this.
I totally think that's awesome, and I really appreciate you coming down, and I would love to get involved somehow. I'd love to make the trip up. If you guys will have me sometime, invite me, show me what's going on. That'd be really cool. Just,
absolutely.
Keep the conversation going, and, just see where it goes.
Absolutely. This won't be the last time we talk.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy Packer, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Sounds great. And everyone listening, please go download SI Eclipse from the Android and the iOS app stores. Thank you very much.
Okay. Nice.
Awesome.
All right.